Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast, brought to you by the Michigan Brewers Guild, celebrating 25 years of camaraderie. The Great Beer State Podcast shares the stories of our member breweries and the rich community of Michigan beer and brewing. Listen in, have a beer, and then check out mibeer.com for a full listing of member breweries, events, and more opportunities to explore and support the Great Beer State. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast. My name's Fred. I'm here with Scott, and we've got a special guest, sort of brewery adjacent, a little more adjacent than some. Matt from the Marquette Food Co-op is our special guest interview today. But first things first, Scott, what's happening around the state as we head into what's the second half of festival season?
Hi, Fred. Yeah, as we record this, we're kind of getting towards the tail end of summer with a successful summer beer festival behind us and really getting ready for the UP Fall Beer Festival in Marquette on September 10th, which is the Saturday after Labor Day. So I think in general, things are, I guess, quiet but busy. I think everybody's busy running their businesses and lots of other events going on that we're not involved with directly as the Brewers Guild. So it's a busy time. I know by the time you get to the end of the summer and into the fall, everybody's kind of tired and worn out and feeling like they need to recharge their batteries a little bit.
Yeah. And we've some things have been normalized in a way which aren't normal, but whether it's staff shortages, supply chain issues, still some haunts of COVID around the staffing and customer workplace. So lots of challenges throughout the summer, but a little more normalcy if you accept the fact that we don't remember what it was like before 2020 anymore.
That's a good point. One of the things that's been in the news quite a bit just lately has to do with CO2 shortages, food grade CO2, and supply chain challenges. I don't think we've seen the severity in Michigan that some areas breweries have had to shut down for a few days or couldn't keep up with production because they didn't have enough CO2 supply. And this is, I'm not an expert in it, but it's a consequence of the production of other things. And then the food grade CO2 is a byproduct, and it's supply chain disruptions of ammonia, fertilizer, other things. And there's certainly other users of CO2 as well. But most breweries, technology has never really developed CO2 recovery and cleaning and reuse in a brewery. So it's mostly brought in trucks. It's a critical supply, not only being dissolved directly into the beer, but for moving beer around, for purging tanks, and lots of applications in the brewery. It's a critical supply or raw material. And like I said, fortunately, in talking with folks, they've had some issues with shortage, prices gone up, but I haven't talked to anybody in Michigan who's had a major disruption yet. So hopefully that gets straightened out.
I don't know who had CO2 in the betting pool, but couldn't have been many people. If you talk about what are you going to run out of that's going to really halt production, I don't think anybody's guessing CO2 a few years back.
No.
Cans maybe, hops maybe, malt maybe, even staff maybe. CO2, this goes to show you never know what's coming around the corner.
One more thing,
add it to the list. So festival tickets really for throughout the rest of the year are on sale now, so check that out. We're also starting to put viewing parties up for the Great Beer State documentary, which we're going to be pushing now through Detroit on October 22nd, which is the actual 25th anniversary of the first gathering, not the actual signing and official start date of the guild, but the date. If you've been listening at all, you've heard the story of Hamilton Street Pub, and that fated gathering was October 22nd, 25 years ago in 1997. So that's that. Take a look at mibeer.com on the 25th anniversary page there. You can get all the details.
Yeah, you can also reach out directly to any of your favorite breweries and ask them if they're planning to schedule a viewing party. It's
Yeah.
really engaging, fun to watch. I think it would be fun to watch even if you haven't been following the industry. But if you have, I just think it's something that everybody will enjoy.
Yeah. So for anybody curious, it's a collection of interviews organized around a few themes, really just trying to illustrate points of view, stories, perspectives on what it was like for the Michigan brewers and brewing community to come together, form the Michigan Brewers Guild, and end up where we are today, 25 years later. So an interesting tale for sure. And I think you find out a few of there's a lot of common threads across the US and even across the world in terms of craft breweries, how they operate, how they come together. But there are unique characteristics based on the people, the state laws, the geography, the resources, the time that it happened. Different states broke a lot later than others. Michigan wasn't the first, but was certainly like the first, second wave, meaning not far behind. The West Coast came Michigan, and our community grew up pretty early in terms of having states with being known for their brewing communities. So you learn a little bit there.
Yeah.
Brewers Dozen. Our next stop is to go through our member roles of the Michigan Brewers Guild, share who's out there. We're in the F's and G's here, going alphabetically this time around the horn. And we hope that sharing these breweries will give you a reminder of somebody you should go visit, either somebody you haven't been to in a while or somebody who you just found out about and need to go. So who's up first, Scott?
Well, I think the first one's a classic example of that. The Fountain Hill Brewery is the student brewery at Grand Rapids Community College, and they have very limited hours there. It's really student run and student serviced, the restaurant and the pub and the brewery, but it's a bona fide brewery. I haven't been able to quite make it fit in my schedule, but I'm looking forward to going and having a meal there at some point, because I've been to several meetings there where they feed us lunch and the students prepare, and it's always really top notch. So I'm sure the restaurant's a good experience, and they do a good job with the beer in general too. So Fountain Hill Brewery in Grand Rapids is probably a lesser known.
Yeah, put it on the list. Four Leaf Brewing in Clare.
Frankenmuth Brewing Company in Frankenmuth.
Your alma mater.
Yeah, I spent some time in a different incarnation or iteration than it is now. I was there pre-tornado, and this is definitely post, and it's a different place, but on the same location. It's a beautiful brewery.
And the tornado was mid 90s. Was that 95, 96?
It was thereabouts. I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact date, but yeah, it was a bad thing.
Fresh Coast Beer Works in Traverse City.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're still doing their homebrew supply, but they started as a homebrew supply in a small licensed brewery. So really neat operation. Then they moved. Yeah, and then Grand Armory Brewing Company in Grand Haven. So along Lakeshore, further south.
Yeah, and in Grand Rapids, we've got Grand Rapids Brewing Company. And this is a second iteration, a different company who acquired the brand and kind of moved it downtown. But it you'll hear this story in the documentary and in the John Swoboda episode, because this was one of the early, that brand was one of the early brew pubs on 28th Street there. Had to be within a year or two of the law.
Yeah, it was, I think, in the group of the first three brew pubs or so.
Yeah.
And in the early years, there was more of a tendency to open a brew pub, a licensed brew pub, than going with the microbrewery license route, which is reversed now.
Yeah, and that, I should mention it's not related to the story of who's there now, other than that I do think it, and the Grand Rapids Brewing Company existed as a brand way before that, pre-prohibition. So there's a lot of history there, currently on Ionia, and making great beer.
Yeah. that brings us to Grand River Brewery in Jackson.
And that brings us to Grand River Brewery in Marshall.
Yeah, it's a 2-location operation, both nice places. Gravel Bottom Craft Brewery and Supply is in Ada, which is in the sort of surrounding Grand Rapids area.
Yeah, and Great Baraboo Brewing Company is in Clinton Township.
Yeah, outside of Detroit, the Metro Detroit area. Gray Line Brewing Company in Grand Rapids, fun place to go. Longtime member of the community, started his own place there, Nate Walser.
And then we got a pair of Griffin Claws. We got Griffin Claw Brewing in Birmingham and Griffin Claw Clubhouse in Rochester Hills.
That's right. That's 13 great places to go have a beer.
Right on. The Brewer's Dozen. So that'll bring us to this week's guest star, Matt. Maybe you can say his last name. I
Matt
don't.
Gougeon.
Gougeon. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been Matt from the co-op forever for me. But I think this is an interesting interview. It's an interesting story and relationship. And I'm glad to be bringing in some of these sort of our community builders that aren't necessarily breweries or brewers, but have definitely been part of building this craft community that we're part of.
Yeah, there are a lot of supporting people behind those that you may know or associate with the brewery. And Matt is the general manager of the Marquette Food Co-op. He's been there a long time, helped develop it into a pretty substantial neighborhood grocery store with a bakery operation and, a food, I guess, finished food manufacturing operation there, sort of. Really a success story and a cool thing in Marquette. But Matt really sees himself as a connection maker and has his ear and fingers in all areas of the community. And he got involved in helping our festival in Marquette before the first year and was a significant helper for many years and is still part of the community there. He helped in so many ways, was just willing to pick the ball up and run with it and make that event part of the success that it's been.
Yeah, and I recall going to Marquette as a beer ambassador well before the fest, probably a little more than 10 years before the fest, and ended up knowing Matt. And then seeing this relationship between the brewing community, the Brewers Guild specifically, and the co-op through Matt develop was just a great thing to witness, because I feel like it really showcases that community building aspect, meaning what they were doing with food is sort of, if you squint, it's a similar arc to what we were doing with beer. And then so we kind of somehow or another recognize that in each other. And I think joining forces made it all hum in a different way, that it became much more than a festival. It became much more than just helping put a festival on. It was communities merging. And they were, they were an advocate of Michigan and craft beer in the market prior to that.
Oh yeah, they've had Michigan beer on their shelves probably for as long as they've been selling beer, would be my guess. But I don't know. The first time I ever went in the co-op, certainly they didn't have the same variety that they might today, but they were selling Michigan beer.
Yeah, and it was a smaller store, but they were a beacon of support that then, as you'll hear the story through this conversation, which took place at the Fall Beer Festival 2021 up in Marquette. As you'll hear, both kind of grew simultaneously, but that you'll hear it. You've heard it in several interviews, but I kind of marvel at the before and after of the first Fall Beer Fest in UP, which credit goes to you, I think, who bravely said, we're going to hold a beer festival in the UP. I don't know how many people you had in your corner, but I know that was a mission of yours, and it comes with some challenges, but the before and after of that part of our timeline is remarkable.
Yeah, that
You're
might be one of the more dramatic stories of how a festival helped bring the industry along locally. But yeah, you're right. When we're looking at expanding our festival schedule, it made the most sense to be where more people were, and we were going to add the Detroit festival. And I kind of felt like the whole northern part of the state, while less populated, there's this huge geography being sort of neglected. And I'd like to think that I championed that. And we wound up, because it was so hard to pick a time frame and get something started, we decided to do them both in the same year, to add two. So here we are today, 13, 14 years later.
Yeah, like through this interview, through Chumley's interview, the BlackRock's interview, you really also Terry at Veerling, those are all out there. All of those illustrate how it was much like Marquette had a beer scene. It was different than it is now, but it was chunking along. It was a little epicenter for beer. And Lower Michigan had a beer scene that was chunking along. And then the festival sort of connected the peninsulas in a way that they hadn't been before.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to think about it, and I agree.
So with that, we'll let Matt share his perspective. Longtime Michigan and craft beer supporter, coming from the natural, local, sustainable food movement perspective. And here's Matt in Marquette, Michigan, and Lower Harbor.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for everything you've contributed behind the scenes, and cheers.
And to the whole team at the Food Co-op. Matt, happy Beer Fest.
Thank you. I'm so happy that Beer Fest is back.
Yes, me too. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could start to share a little bit about who you are and what your role, what you do here in Marquette.
Yeah. Well, I'm the general manager of the Marquette Food Co-op, a venerable institution that is 50 years old this year.
Wow.
I run the co-op, but it's more than that. We're deeply involved in local agriculture, local food. We operate a food hub. We have a whole program of educational services that we provide in our community. To be clear, we pay for all of this through running a grocery store that focuses on organic, natural, and local foods. We're in a town of about 20,000 permanent residents. We have 6,000 member households that own the same share of our store. So we're deeply embedded in this community. And my role running that operation is to really represent this community and to try and hit it down the middle for our 6,000 member households. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not only delivering accessible, quality food to them, but you're sort of managing an ecosystem of what that relationship can look like too. Right?
Absolutely. And with that many stakeholders that we have, and we don't just count our member households, we count the local community itself. So that means the city fathers, if you will, and the city fathers and mothers, all of our vendors, not just our local farms and that, but all of our distributors and wholesalers. We really try to take a holistic approach to operating and doing business in our community. So there's lots of eyes on what we do, and that's both a blessing and a curse. But it ends up being a lot of fun, and we end up really making a positive impact in our community. I'm really proud of our organization and everybody that works for us.
Yeah, when you talk about a lot of eyes on and members and participation, that also seems like a model. I mean, that's sort of the point, right? Like, I know when we first met, I learned a lot more about that overall business model and community model here, even though I was aware of it in some other communities. So can you talk a little bit about how your structure is different and what that sort of, how it relates to the greater community member or not?
Yeah. Well, we are governed by a board of directors that are elected out of our regular membership. So anybody can nominate themselves or be nominated. to be a member of our board. The membership elects them. That board then, their responsibility is more than just physical. Their responsibility is to truly decide the overall direction of the organization. Direction maybe isn't the right word, maybe values is the proper word. So they create value statements that then get converted into policy. And I got a policy manual about that thick that I have to comply with, if you will, and I report on a regular basis, on a monthly cadence, if we are in compliance or not with those policies. Not a good, bad judgment, just whether we're not in compliance or we are in compliance. If we're not in compliance, I present a plan for how we get into compliance with that.
Right.
So our board, they talk about very big picture stuff, but then those policies can then narrow in on very specific things that we are, charged with, to have accomplished at the end of every day.
Yeah.
So a very different model. So rather than a traditional corporate model that's very top down, we are bottom up completely, because the people whose needs we are serving are the people who are making the decisions for the entire organization. And my job is to see that those things get carried out and that those needs get met.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your first intersection with the Michigan Brewers Guild.
Wow.
And leading up to the first time this festival happened here.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. I'll really condense it because it can be kind of long. But the short of it is I think I was errantly included on an email string when the Brewers Guild was looking for a place to host the festival. And there were different venues around. I was included on that, and I just piped in that, definitely it's got to be Lower Harbor was one of the choices. There were other choices for venues.
Yeah.
And then Scott Graham, your executive director of the Guild, eventually contacted me, I think simply because of the reputation of the co-op in the community. And at that time, this is back in 2009, co-op was a much smaller organization. We had a very little store. Maybe 1,500 members that belonged to it. But he came to me because I think he just sensed that I was involved in the community in a different way than maybe other people were. And he was looking for volunteers, and he was looking for some food, because at the time, and I might be wrong about this, but this was the first festival where we're far away from the rest of Michigan up here, and we knew that brewers had to come a great distance, so they came the night before, Friday night. So Scott wanted some food to be available to the breweries that showed up. And so we run a grocery store, we're tapped into local ag, all of that stuff, so we were a good fit for that. And at that first beer fest here, it was me standing over a grill cooking brats for all the arriving brewers, which was a ton of fun.
Nice.
But we looped in a band, we had music, and then Scott was also asking for, hey, who do you know who can volunteer? We need to take care of trash and recycling, blah, blah, blah. We got to get a fence up. And I said, well, I'm kind of your one-stop shop here. I said, we can take care of that. We'll take care of the food. We can locate a fence. We'll get connected with the UP 200, the big sled dog race that happens in February here. They have a lot of wooden fencing. We got music down here, and it just carried on from there.
Yeah, and that seems like very Marquette in terms of people know who to get involved for the right things, and everybody seems to really treasure this park and the overall community involvement. I mean, it seems like Marquette cares about what festivals are here, and they're going to nurture the ones that they connect to. And you seem to represent Marquette very well in that.
We
felt welcome.
Absolutely. Marquette does love its festivals. I mean, this particular park is busy all summer and into the fall. I think this is the last festival of the year, every year. But I had no problem rounding up 30 volunteers to bend over and pick up garbage in their own city park. We're proud of this place. This festival in particular, I think, is really kind of uniquely speaks to the Yooper mentality, the people that live here. Good times, good beer, lots of fun. everyone behaving themselves. There's a real can-do spirit here in the city of Marquette and in the UP throughout. So it's just a natural sort of inclination for everyone to just want to help out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of a match made in heaven, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about the beer community of Marquette and the UP, maybe in a little bit of before and after Beer Fest? So like, there's beer culture here before.
Yeah.
But I think that this Beer Fest going on for 12 years has influenced, or at least been along for the ride during its shift. How has beer community changed in Marquette and UP over the last 12 years?
I think the beer community has changed dramatically in that time period. At that first Beer Fest, we had the Veerling up here, and then there was Jasper Ridge and Ishpeming. There was the craft beer community and throughout the state of Michigan and even nationally was really known, but we're kind of a distant outpost. So for the waves of the new things in our nation, they crashed to the shore a little bit later here.
Try to take it easy.
And after we had that first Beer Fest, I think it was really eye-opening to a lot of people here in Marquette, because all the breweries downstate, they came to us, and it really opened minds and it really opened palates. And you know, I don't want to speak for the fellas at Black Rock's brewery, but I know they were in attendance at that first Beer Fest, and it really inspired them to like get off the dime and to fully move into motion to create their own brewery. And those guys are now paragons of the business community and the community of Marquette here. So, in fact, all of our breweries are. And that's a really interesting thing, is that the breweries in our community really sort of represent across the board the various groups of people here in the UP. And I think people in the UP look to their breweries to do the right things, to be a part of them, to gather at them. It's you know, if I imagine, you know, old world Europe and what the breweries meant to towns and communities then, I think it's probably a little bit like that they kind of become the center of community. It's the place where families come. It's the place where friends come. It's all feel good all the time. And I know that the breweries respond to that. They give back a lot in this community. Andy and Wes Pernsteiner at the Ordock, how many community events do they host inside their facility? I couldn't even count how many. People depend on them, not just for entertainment, but for a place to gather for other worthy causes. It's really significant. That first Brewfest, I think, really kicked off a new way for people to gather energy, to do the right things in this particular community. I know it did for me. I mean, I do my best to support all our local breweries.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's hard work, but somebody's got to do it.
It's hard work, but somebody's got to do it, yeah.
Do you have a sense, I feel like you, through our conversations over the years, that you connect to different, you know, leaders around the country and different models. Do you have a sense about what the world should know about Michigan, or what's the signature of the Michigan brewing scene that stands out compared to other places in the world?
Well, we're talking a lot about people here. I think everything starts and ends with people. You know, that's my philosophy when I approach my work at the co-op. You know, nothing works without people being engaged in what they're doing. You know, it's an old business adage that if you have engaged employees, they will take care of everything else that your business needs. And I think it's that way in the brewing industry, at least being a relative outsider in that industry that I am anyway. I mean, I don't work in that industry. I know a lot of people who do work in that industry, but one thing I absolutely notice is the engagement. And that engagement kind of manifests in the breweries seeking out locally or Michigan-produced ingredients, which I think is really key. I mean, there's I don't know how many tens of thousands of people work in the brewing industry now, but there's also many farms. Hop farms have sprung up all over the state. There's people growing grain all over the state. There's a number of malting houses in the state of Michigan now. We actually have one here in the UP. I think that sort of transformative change, that sort of engagement on this very much broader level is really significant, and I think the brewing community is responsible for that.
Yeah, I think by and large, they're more likely to make those decisions on the food front as well as their brewing front.
Absolutely,
which may be
yeah.
limited sometimes in terms of ingredient type or whatever, but I think not always, but they're more likely than not to ask harder questions and get better answers in their kitchen as well as their brew house.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great. I really want to appreciate you being part of our community and being part of welcoming us to Marquette. It's been a great run. It's so great to be back, especially after the shutdown and everything.
Yeah,
So,
it's a super happy vibe here right now, I can tell you that.
Thanks for being part of it.
You bet. Michigan Brewers Guild, speaking on behalf of the community of Marquette and the Upper Peninsula, we love you, we see you for what you've done, what you've accomplished, and what you mean in building community throughout this state, one tiny little locality at a time. Thank you.
I think we knew it was big work, but I don't think we had the range of vision to understand what it was going to look like or how much of an impact it was going to have.
I mean, State of Michigan, Travel Michigan, Pure Michigan recognizes craft beer as one of their top 10, maybe less, maybe top 5 reasons people come to Michigan. It's part of our story.
Michigan is an anomaly in the country for how powerful the guild is.
When I first started, there was probably only 8 or 10 other breweries. See, when I went to try to learn anything, there was only one other brewery in the UP, which was Hereford and Hops. And that's the only other brewer I could go talk to at the time. So it was pretty kind of limited. That first brew fest here changed everything. Craft beer is just totally accepted as the real beer now, and I think that's awesome.
I remember thinking how good I thought this was going to be for our fledgling industry, because people didn't really see us as an industry that had staying power. We're such a mature, established industry that people take so seriously.
We have to make this a qualitative conversation. You should engage with our products because they're an enhanced experience and that there's something to this.
Where I really got excited was, wow, this is the beginning of a whole new industry. You know, nobody's doing this.
It actually put brewers in each other's faces and to try each other's beers.
Different breweries adding 6 beers, 8 beers, 10 beers. You know, you've seen as many as 20 to 30 different beers.
To have that connection where somebody feels like, I know somebody, we see it as such an opportunity to develop contacts and culture and knowledge.
Hey, look, there goes Joe Short, you know, his name's on this. I get to say hi to him. People love that.
You know, I'll ask questions and he'll tell me anything. Hey, where do you get your supplies? How long does what's the temperature range on this yeast? Anything from A to Z. And they answer all my questions.
I feel like we were a community of people that were really in love with what we were doing. That's what the Guild's job was. It's like this is a group of people who got together for one purpose.
For a little engine that could think, like, we pull off a hell of a party, 4 times a year for a lot of people. And I'm very proud of the show that we put on.
It just reaches out, it just spread out, and it touched everybody. And it became a cool thing to do.
Congratulations on 25 wonderful years. We're going to keep growing, and here's to the next 25.